Good afternoon everyone and welcome to our presentation on the recent 5-Star Audit updates. I'm Charlotte Lander, Brand and Marketing Communications Manager here at British Safety Council. Unfortunately, Dave Parr can't join us today, so Rob Pugh, our Senior Consultant, will be taking his place presenting on the Health and Safety Audit side, and Keith Whitehead will be presenting the 5-Star Environmental Audit changes. Before we get started, I want to run through a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. You have joined today's webinar listening through your computer's speaker system by default. If you'd like to dial in using your phone, just locate the audio pane on the webinar screen and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. If you want to ask questions at any point, you can type questions to the panelist using the questions pane. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation where we'll respond to as many of your questions as we can. Okay, so today's presentation will cover the context of the new specifications, scoring and reporting structure, the 5-Star Occupational Health and Safety Audit, the 5-Star Environmental Audit, and then finally your questions at the end. I'll now hand over to Rob, who'll be introducing the new specifications and talking you through the 5-Star Occupational Health and Safety Audit specification.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll kick off straight away, basically. So why has the specification for the audit changed? We try and do this every 12 months. We've succeeded so far. We look at changes in best practice, we look at legislation and general trends in health and safety, and we pick that up from the audits we've done previously. So our auditors are very good at feeding back things they've seen that they like and they think are exceptional, and we try and incorporate these into the new audit going forward. We also look at or talk to our peers, IARC, HSE, etc., and look at how the audit can best serve the client, which is yourselves. So we don't really try and bash you over the head with a big stick. This is not a compliance audit, as we've said. It's about how we can help you. In the webinar, I'll run through the changes to the specification and explain some of the other changes and the thinking behind them. Okay, so we're going to talk about some amended sectional headings, the element headings, best practice indicators, which is a big change really, how they're quantified, and the report format and the content, where the changes will be in there. So, looking at the section heading changes, we've gone from policy and organisation to policy and structure, really, because that's more what that section is looking at, the structure of the organisation rather than the organisation itself. So we're trying to be more specific with the heading. Strategy and planning, strategic planning, really pretty much semantics, although there were a lot of questions over what's the difference between strategy and planning, so we've changed that. Implementation and operation stays the same and is still the largest part of the audit itself. Performance evaluation is an issue. Performance measurement changes to performance evaluation. And that really is to try and push out the fact that we're not expecting you to just measure how many accidents you have, but to actually do something with that information and that data. And from the point of view of evaluation, the section 5, evaluation and review, we've dropped that aspect and called it management review and improvement. This is to bring out this requirement that the audit already has, to involve senior top management in all health and safety aspects, not necessarily the day-to-day, although they're expected to demonstrate that, but more to do with the strategic aspects of it going forward. So that it stays the same in terms of two sections covering plan, one covering do, one covering check, and one covering act. But what you can see there from this diagram, 5 best practice indicators are now replacing the old 2 safety management indicators that the previous audit had. You can see underneath there, leadership remains as a BPI as opposed to an SMI. Stakeholder engagement is added, risk management is added, organisational health and safety culture is added, and continual improvement stays. Sections are still scored the same. We didn't feel there was a need to change that. I think it definitely reflects the fact that if you don't implement all the nice things you talk about, then people still get hurt. So the best practice indicators. Previously, the SMI was an idea that we had that would reward people, and the EMI, sorry, would reward people for good attempts at continual improvement and showing good leadership. Well, in effect, what happened was that they are really rewarding people who are scoring high anyway, and not particularly picking up people who are aspirational. So individual BPIs are the way we're going forward. We thought we needed 5 of these rather than 2. And they are scored in the same way as the SMI, but they do not contribute to the overall score for the going towards the star rating. So you will get a guide on how well you've scored in those 5 BPIs, but that does not contribute to the final scoring of the audit. We consider them to be the key components of a best practice SMS or AMS. And our comments and observations in the audit reports should provide a structured route for yourselves to go towards continued improvement. As I said before, they don't carry any mark towards the final mark. So looking at the specification changes, these 4 BPIs, as I said previously, leadership was there and hasn't particularly changed from the SMI that was there before. Stakeholder engagement, we're looking for organisations' approach to identifying their stakeholders and how they actually talk to their stakeholders. That involves contractors, that involves members of the public, that involves customers, suppliers, everybody who has an interest in the organisation. Risk management is there because risk management is basically the key to good safety management. Organisational health and safety culture is something that we're trying to recognise more. The audit always covered it, but it's never really been brought out as a particular heading previously. Continued improvement stays as it's essential. So there you see an example of the graph, what the graph will look like in the report. On that graph, indicative level of best practice. Indicative level of best practice is set at 92%, 5-star level. It is possible, not this year, but not 2016, but next year, that we may actually set indicative levels of best practice for all 5 that are at different levels. Okay, so section 1. Few changes here. 103, the structure, we've just added the word structure basically to try and define the roles, responsibilities, accountabilities and authorities that was there as the title previously. No real change to the actual content of the element itself. 106, stakeholder consultation and participation as opposed to consultation, communication and participation. We'd noticed looking back at the audits from last year that communication and consultation and participation were being confused, and it was possibly being sanctioned that just talking to your employees and other stakeholders was enough. What we're driving at is that they need to be consulted, not just talked to, and they need to participate in the health and safety process, not just be told what to do. 107, therefore we need to put communication somewhere, so instead of using 107 as basically a procedure for document management, we're now looking at what's your procedure for dealing with the documents, the information, and how you communicate that information within the business and outside of the business. 108, 109 don't change. 110 is exactly the same or virtually the same question set that appeared under that title in section 2 previously. We've made the change because it sits better in policy and structure than it did in strategic planning. So moving on to strategic planning, which has changed from strategy and planning. The status assessment replaces gap analysis in that title there, and this is because we want to see that organisations are assessing their status on a more regular basis than perhaps a gap analysis might do. So people tend to do gap analysis on a more stretched basis, maybe every 3 years. What we're looking for is how do you document your status assessment on an annual basis? And you can go out and benchmark, that's fine, and it's great if you do, but you don't necessarily benchmark every single year. Occupational health and safety objectives, 202, 203 stay the same. Provision of resource moves to provision of resource and support. This is to try and highlight that it isn't about setting a budget, or it isn't just about setting a budget, sorry, and that support from senior management and from all the other areas of the business, HR, etc., etc., is essential for a decent occupational health and safety department to function. Strategic leadership, again, is in there because leadership appears in several elements and we wanted to differentiate. It's under the heading strategic planning, therefore the leadership that's being commented on and scored in this section should be strategic leadership, not participating or leadership review or anything else like that. Stakeholder consultation and participation again reflects the change in section 1, removing communication from there. Risk management and control, including risk profiling, is a combination now of 207 and 208 from the previous audit become 207. So we've put those two together. Change management doesn't change and is still a key part of the audit. And then we've added planning to competence and capability, again to differentiate from competence and capability elements elsewhere in the audit. Emergency incidents stay the same, as do procurement and contractor appointment and occupational health and safety, health and well-being. The planning for a positive health and safety culture, 213, is purely again to differentiate between implementing a positive health and safety culture or reviewing a positive health and safety culture. So we're looking here for you to have planned what you're doing in terms of positive health and safety culture promotion, rather than just handing over a email request for a smoking cessation policy program that the Occupational Health Centre decided they wanted to run. So it's going to be more difficult to acquire marks in that element. 301, identification of section 3, 301, identification of hazards, opportunities and assessment of risk. Because it's an implementation section, we've changed the title to make it very clear that we're not looking at your policies for risk assessment, we're looking at how you go through that process. So how are you identifying hazards? Are you identifying hazards? How are you identifying opportunities? Are you identifying opportunities? Some organisations will be identifying opportunities by default, others will be consciously looking for opportunities to improve whilst doing risk assessments. That specifically we would look for taking training as an opportunity, the opportunity to train people from a control aspect. We would look for elimination of a hazard as opposed to control of a hazard. So pushing things and taking hazards out of the business would be one example of an opportunity. 302 through 306 stay the same. 307, workplace management, is added in front of the previous title, just to make it clear that's what we're talking about here. No big changes in the question set. 308 through 315 are all the same, essential, not always present, but if they are essential aspects of a safety management system. 316, management and control of electrical hazards, is a change from, let me think, electrical safety, sorry, that basically just reflects the fact that we've got a title, management and control asbestos, so why wouldn't we say management and control of electrical hazards? Competence and capability, we've added implementation to differentiate it from section 2. 321, management and control of psychosocial hazards. New element, we're looking here at how the Occupational Health and Safety Department interact with occupational health, how they interact with HR, how they interact with change management, how they interact, all of those things that are likely to bring psychosocial hazards into the business, like lone working, like long shift patterns, odd shift patterns, like not looking at shift workers as a special case. All of these things that can introduce stress to the business or to people in the business. We would expect to see serious consideration for them and procedures in place for them. Implementing a positive health and safety culture, again, differentiating from planning for a positive health and safety culture. Implementing emergency incident and post-event recovery. We're looking again at saying this is not the plan, this is how are you doing it. And prevention and protective controls are added to 324 to just again highlight the fact that this is practical application of fire safety management. Section 4, one of the big changes there is these proactive measurement leading indicators and reactive or lagging indicators come out as 2 of the elements, and those question sets have been spread out through the proactive and reactive elements that are identified beneath them. So they are now subheadings in the audit rather than individual elements. 405, we've added evaluation of legislative and other compliance in order to differentiate and to make it very clear that this is about how you keep abreast of legislative compliance. Evaluation of information and communication management, again, is changed to reflect the changes we made at section 1 in order to differentiate between participation, consultation and communication. No changes for the rest of section 4. As you can see there, that reactive measurement is now a subheading. And then section 5, which has changed quite a lot. It was originally evaluation and review. We felt that the management involvement of top management, senior management involvement in that was quite, it's still not being picked up particularly well, and certainly not being emphasised by the title. So we've changed the title to emphasise that. We've kept 501 close to where it was. We've added process. And we need to see in there that your top management are actually involved on a regular basis in review and improvement of the health and safety system. Review of resource and support provision. So again, we've added in and support. So it's not enough to just do a budget review. We need to see that management are, and we need to review the active support of management and other stakeholders for the health and safety department. And then continual improvement, we've added evaluation and planning just to make that clear that senior management need to be seen to be involved around these things. And then lastly, 504, a wholly new heading at least, corporate and social responsibility reporting. How do you as an organisation communicate your health and safety performance to the wider world, to your stakeholders and to anybody else, quite frankly, who's interested? Best practice companies do this on a regular basis, on an annual basis at least, and we feel that needs to be in the audit. Okay, I'll take some questions at the end of this, so if you are typing away, just be patient and they will be answered at the end. I hope. I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Keith Whitehead, who will take you through the five-star environmental audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Hope you can all hear me. I'm just trying to share my screen with you there, just to pick up from where Rob left off there. I have this one slide. You've seen this slide before that Rob introduced earlier on, but I thought I'd just highlight it again just to show that some of the environmental rationales, I suppose, of why we've actually changed the FSE specification. And particularly around products and services. Now, many products, many services that you guys produce and now have an environmental requirement. Maybe that's eco-design or eco-efficiency. So this has now been incorporated into some of the audit questionnaires. Obviously, best practice changes, particularly in the environmental field with BAT, best available techniques, so on and so forth. There have been some changes in that area that we've incorporated. Obviously the trends as well, which Rob talked about in SHE trends and topics. There's been quite a lot of changes in the environmental field around legislation, particularly here in the UK, around waste legislation and energy legislation. So we've updated all our question sets to reflect that. And also internationally as well. International policy has changed, particularly the Paris Agreement, which affects all our international colleagues, and I know there are some international colleagues on this webinar, so namaste and salam alaikum to you guys. And there's also been some standard changes. Obviously, those of you may already be aware that ISO 14001 2015 is now in place. So we've reflected some of the requirements on for that particular standard as well. But you know, we do want and we do expect five-star companies to use 14001 really as a floor rather than a ceiling, which lots of organisations do. You know, I've got 14001, that's it. In fact, you should be five-star companies should be looking at the 26 other 14,000 standards which there are, to be able to supplement their 14,001. So there's some hints in are the changes as well for organisations to go down that line. And obviously continual improvement. Now the FSE specification, the old one, used to have 52 specific clauses, and that's now been reduced to 39. But that's not removing or taking stuff away, that's through amalgamation and combining of old clauses together. And those of you who do the environmental audit will see some of the changes. So just like Rob did, I'll go through some of the key changes. We're following the same model, so it's exactly the same model, same scoring, the same way it'll be analysed and calculated will be the same, except obviously the best practice indicators. Some of these are the same, to be honest with you, BP1 and BP5. We've chosen at this particular round anyway to look at leadership and commitment. So and to really to understand that environmental management, just like health and safety, is not an add-on. It's part of the business strategy, and those of you who have looked at 14,001 2015 now have an understanding of what leadership actually should look like, and it's not just rolling the CEO out for 20 minutes every year. BP2s we thought would be something which organisations should really drill down into. That's understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So obviously having an understanding of all your internal and external stakeholders, but formally analysing their needs. Now, that could be a regulator, who obviously has got certain mandatory needs, or it could be expectations of communities that you work in. So you know, this is best practice, and it also underpins your communication strategy that runs throughout the whole of the audit. Obviously the old aspects and impacts under 14,001 2004 have been improved, that's the right word, to look at not only your aspects, but what are your operational and organisational risks and opportunities. Now, some of you, as soon as I said operational and organisational, you may have thought, hang on a minute, that's ISO 31000, the risk management standard, and you would be absolutely correct, because obviously 45001 and 14001, the new standards, are all based around that particular standard. So there's one I would already expect you to have an understanding of. But also looking at environment presents the environment presents risks to you guys. Climate change, you can argue all day whether it's happening, but for some businesses it has a very strong impact on their supply chain already. So looking at the risks in that, and also opportunities that environmental management can bring. Supply chain management and outsourcing is a new other BPI, because 80% on average of your organisation's environmental footprint isn't within the confines of your boundary. It's in your supply chain and who you use and how operations are outsourced. And then continual improvement, obviously that's the whole nature of an environmental management system, or any system, but we're looking at the system improves year on year. And I've been to many organisations over many years I know what the system's going to look like every time I go in every year, because it never improves. It's never continually improvement is required there. Okay, so going quickly then through the different the specification model, policy and structure. Talked a bit about leadership and commitment. Obviously behind these clauses there's lots of questions. The question sets have not changed, so even though we've gone from 52 down to 39, the number of questions that you guys have got to answer has not changed. So one of the key areas changes in this is 1.02, where we're going to expect your organisation to have an understanding of its context. Clearly we're on this bit of rock which is travelling at 70,000 miles an hour through space. We ain't going to go anywhere and you can't get off. So you've got to understand your organisation and how it draws upon material resources, how the emissions affect the context of the organisation, and also how political, pestle analysis, political, economic, social, technical, legal and environmental aspects affect the EMS, and they do. So you really have to do I think when you see that there, I'd make a note, just say pestle analysis, because that's exactly what it is. Obviously the needs and expectations of interested parties, so some sort of formal understanding of them is 103. Just like Rob correctly pointed out, and it's probably even worse in environmental management, if that's the right term to use, is that many environmental management systems don't have the participation of all levels of staff across all departments and functions. So we're really going to be hot on this in terms of making sure that it reflects the health and safety participation, because that's something that over the last few years we've seen that's not been a requirement. 105 is the scope of the environmental management system. So historically some firms have said we've got 14,001, but it's just for the offices, and outside there might be a big petrochemical plant. So the scope now requires you to have actually incorporated all your significant environmental operations into the scope. 107 and 108, just jump into those, roles, resources and responsibilities. So becoming a little bit more proactive in defining environmental roles, responsibilities and authorities, just like you do with health and safety. And 108 really is a nod and a wink to the IEMA, Institute of Environmental Management Skills Map, that you've identified all the competence and capability of your staff. And it may be HSE staff, but it could be a very big S, medium-sized H, and a very little E. But for competence and capability, that E has got to link to the S. It's got to have the same level of qualification. Strategically then, strategic planning, 201 is an amalgamation. We've got the identification and evaluation of organisational and operational, there's that word again, 41,000 nod. Environmental aspects the risks to the organisation and opportunities. Now, I've been working recently with an organisation who are doing 14,001 2015, whose risks, organisational risks, are climate change risks that they're doing, and you can download stuff on climate change risks, but you must have an understanding that we're not just talking about the bog standard aspects and impacts chart that you're all probably aware of. I'm looking at opportunities as well. So I know some of you have probably done ESOS recently, where you had to look at all your energy and identify savings or opportunities, hence the word energy saving opportunities. And you can do that approach for waste, you can do it for water, you can do it for raw materials, you can do it for practically everything. So we're thinking that you should be identifying opportunities for environmental management. Determination of compliance obligations, well, that's pretty much legal and other requirements. 203 there is benchmarking and identification of best practices. So we're not suggesting that you put all the best practices in, but there are best practices in office environmental management. There's best practices in the number of reams per person in an office. There's best practices for storage of materials. So we'd like you to think that you've identified them and you've at least analysed them and really assessed whether they could be, implemented within your organisation or not. And some form of benchmarking as well, either sector benchmarking or using governmental benchmarks, so you know where you stand in the grand scheme of things, the context, I suppose. Objectives and plans to achieve them. Obviously, when you've identified some issues, you're going to set some objectives. Now, there's a big hint in here now that you should be using another standard here, 14,031, to help establish objectives and targets. 205 there on the slide is all your operational controls, so that you've got the right number, depth and breadth of operational controls to tackle your key environmental risks. Okay, so outsourcing, 206 there. Obviously 80% of your footprint generally is outside of your business, so clearly has to be a specific clause, and we'll be looking at how you plan and in your tenders and so on and so forth, and how you do almost like a life cycle thinking of your supply chain. Change management stays the same as it was before. The biggest changes and the biggest amalgamations are in section 3, so I'll just quickly go over these. I mean, I think the titles say everything that you need to know, but 301 is obviously you've got indirect and direct greenhouse gas emissions, or ODS, ozone depleting substances, so how you're managing them, how you're minimising them, using 14,064 perhaps as a model for that. I know some of you are legally required to reduce your greenhouse gases, energy, so again, like the audits of the old, sometimes it's applicable to your operation, sometimes it's not, so that's also incorporated into the audit scoring. 302 is a bit more local air emissions, so your dusts, your light pollution, and all the nuisances. So again, if it's applicable to your operations, obviously construction jumps out there probably, how you're doing that. You all use energy, so every single business requires some form of energy minimization and management plan. So how are you going to do it? Is it going to be formal? Is it going to be ISO 50001 for the big energy users, or if you're just a small operation, just dropping in or just knowing how much you use and setting in some small objectives and targets there. Water discharges, again, applicable to a lot of operations, how you manage those and how you reducing water and managing it and minimizing water where you can, where it's applicable. 305 is knowing that all your materials, so that may be from your operational, that maybe that goes into your products or what you use, but it's even down to office stationery, the canteen, what you're using, so everything that comes onto your site, you have an understanding of the materials that you use, what you're using, can you minimize them, can you change them, okay, so having some understanding of that. Okay, that's one of the most expensive things you'll ever do, and that's waste stuff. So waste management, duty of care principles, in there, the precautionary principle, proximity principles, and minimization is obviously the waste hierarchy. So, you know, from top to bottom there, what you're doing to reduce waste, to improve your efficiency. 307, when it all goes wrong, it can go wrong. So what you're doing for those organisations which potentially have a greater risk on the environment, should there be an environmental accident, or health and safety accident, that's emergency preparedness and response, what you're doing in that. And that could be from low-level stuff, spill kits, right up to maps and coma sites. So there's a whole range of things in there. Hazardous substances, how you're managing, you know, we expect you to manage 1 litre of oil as though you're managing an oil refinery. So, you know, hazardous substances, chemical management, what you're doing, primary, secondary and tertiary controls are in place. All the 3P model, people, procedures and practical measures are in place, because without one of those P's, the other two won't work. And minimisation, can you substitute it? Can you minimise it? 309 is an expanded clause. Some of you have discharges into streams where there may be SSSIs. Some of you have even ecological and archaeological protected sites, either next to your site, and in some cases recently I've seen on site. And how you're managing that, the requirements of that. 310 is really about environmental impact assessment or local planning law, which some has environmental controls in, such as delivery times and so on and so forth. And any land contamination that you may have, just how you've identified it and you're managing it for protection of the environment. And 311 used to be called green transport in the old spec. It's now transport and travel planning. So we're expecting you to have some understanding of business travel. Okay, now that's either internally with your staff, and even outsourced transport, freight, what you're doing to measure, monitor it, reduce it, manage it. So again, all organisations have, that would be generally applicable to. Finishing off then very quickly with the other section 4. It's all about evaluating the performance. So just jump to 402 there. We're not looking for 402. We're not looking for an an actual procedure here. We're looking that you have evaluated, changed, incorporated all your operation environmental risks on a regular basis. We want to see a process of it being evolving, and you're evaluating it as you go on and go forth. 404 and 405 we've just broken up there because it's nearly always the age-old problem of what's an inspection and what's an audit. I don't believe it still exists, but it does. So we brought internal inspection programs, so environmental inspection programs, as opposed to 405, which is a formal approach to auditing your environmental management system to the structure and guidelines as set out in ISO 19011, which is the auditing standard, and that you're auditing your system over the 3-year period, and there's a proper audit scheduling and so on and so forth. How are your suppliers doing? How is your outsource doing from an environmental viewpoint? Again, how you evaluated them. 407 is simply, have you had any prosecutions? Okay, everyone always says no to that, amazingly. Okay, so section 5 then, last slide, I'll hand you back to Charlotte. Obviously, leadership and commitment is going to be in there because it's right at the very front, and it underpins the whole of 14,001 and the 45,001. We've got to see that you're reviewing competence and capability. We've got to see that the health and safety person who's been given environment, who have maybe not up to the, I won't say scratch, but not up to the levels of training which the 5-star audit requires, has been evaluated. And in the FSA, Rob had a clause there which said corporate reporting, social reporting. That's incorporated here into 5.04 communication, where it's sort of it's internal communication, but also external communication. And there's also a hint there to ISO 14063, okay, which is the communication guidance for environmental management systems. And then, like I said before, don't want to be coming in every year to see that the system has not improved. It's just stayed the same. There has to be continual improvement in the system itself, and that's what the new standard identifies. Okay, so quite a lot of stuff in there, changes. It's certainly, obviously the question sets have been amalgamated. I think Charlotte might point you in the right direction of the new specification. I don't think there's nothing to, for those of you who are doing the environmental audit now, not too much to worry about, I suggest. I think there's some improvements in there, and obviously during the audit, should you be doing it this year, we'll definitely talk you through it. I mean, nothing in here is brought in to really try to trip anybody up. I mean, it is improvement. We do want you to improve, just as we want the audit to improve. But there's nothing in here which we want you to throw a curveball, really, to throw in to reduce you, I suppose. We don't want, you know, that's not the idea of why we've updated this. To be honest with you, it's like anything else. It's like buying a smartphone. You walk out the shop and it's out of date. So, but you know, we will be reviewing this annually, as we already do. So at that then, thank you very much. I'm sure there's a few other things I could mention, but I'm not going to mention here. I think you'll have our emails. Please feel free to contact us and try and explain. So on that note then, I will say thank you very much. Apologies for the sore throat, but I have got man flu. And I'll hand you back over to Charlotte. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody.
Great, thank you, Keith. We have had some questions, so I'll run through a couple of those now. So the first question that we have is for Rob. So could you list a few of the stakeholders, and are these the same for both health and safety and environment?
Hi, Minu. Yeah, they are the same, and they would be along the lines of your neighbours may have an interest and may need to be informed of things that are going on within your site. Customers, you should have an expectation. They should have an expectation of you and your performance. It could be members of the public if you have they have access to parts of your site, or that you have a discharge potential that may include them. Contractors, as in people who provide repair services and servicing services. Subcontracted people where you may have outsourced your transport. You don't outsource your responsibility for that. You need to keep on top of that. Or warehousing, similarly. Your employers, obviously. Your employees, sorry, obviously. So yeah, even down to zero-hour contract workers. All of these people have a vested interest in your performance in a health and safety perspective. I can't sort of off the top of my head come up with much else on that, but that's really it. It is everybody that is impacted by your operations and can be put at risk by your risks, your hazards, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And now a question for Keith. What sort of things would you be looking for in relation to leadership and commitment?
Okay, thank you there. That's a $1 million question, isn't it? Well, what we're not looking for is to roll out the senior management for 20 minutes to nod their head and say the environment is important to our business and then leave. I mean, that's clearly not what any management system should be, and that's one of the reasons 40,001 and 45,001 changed, actually, is to stop it being this add-on. I mean, the actual standard itself, if you go to the standard, leadership and commitment, there are several things that are listed in there which you could argue, can use the basis for the audit. So we would be looking for the fact that the top management and that definition has also been changed in the new standard. So I would suggest you go and have a look at that that definition, top management. It isn't just the environmental HSE manager. That they take sort of accountability, that they've got accountability for the effectiveness of the EMS. I think that's one of the key things, and it's written into them. It's a written accountability. That they know what the objectives and targets are for the site. They know how they fit the strategic direction of the organisation, and they understand the context of they understand the context of their operations. They understand all the requirements that we mentioned earlier on. How that affects their business. Obviously, resources is always a good reflection of a commitment and leadership to a SHE system. So making sure that the resources are available. Obviously, resources is a bottomless pit in many cases, but at least though to make it to the level that you have set yourself, the scope you have defined, that they are available. That they walk the walk, they do the safety tours, they do the environmental tours, they're involved with it, they show that HSE is important, that they do the same as everybody. They don't not engage or contribute to the environmental management system. They help to direct and they support the senior HSE team in the environmental management system. They promote continual improvement themselves. I mean, there's a whole raft of things which a real leader and real commitment can be shown. So we'd be looking for those sort of things. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's the sort of things I would expect a leader to show.
Okay, thanks Keith. We have time for one more question. How do the audits differ from the ISO standard audits, Rob?
Hi Lloyd. Yeah, they're very different really. As Keith said, I think that they're the floor, not the ceiling. The aspects from ISO audit are quite different though, other than the content, which we think anyway. We feel that we're a lot deeper in the content. But the main issue is that if in ISO and OSAS audits, there are no such thing as an ISO health and safety audit at the moment, although that may change next year, is that they will, with an ISO audit, you either have it or you don't have it. You are either compliant or non-compliant. There is not any aspect of an ISO audit that should be advisory in any way. So you either are certificated or not. With 5-star, you get a grading on your systems, so you've got a baseline to work from effectively. So you might come out with 3 stars, but as well as that 3 stars, you end up with an action plan that you can choose to implement. So where we deduct a mark in a 5-star audit, the auditor is obliged to actually recommend what you should do to get that mark back. So there's an element there of advisory as well as audit from that aspect of it. I hope that's explained that. Thank you.
Great, thank you Rob. Okay, so that's all the questions we have time for. If you do have any more questions or you'd like a copy of the slides, then please email us at webinar@britsafe.org. You can see on your screens now all of our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube if you'd like to follow us and get more information. And finally, if you do want to download a copy of either the health and safety or environmental 5-star specifications and the summary of change documents, they are on our website at www.britsafe.org/audit. Thanks very much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.